Hey guys, it's Linux Next here. In today's video, I had a conversation with someone on Reddit a couple days ago because of a specific user having a problem with their new RDNA 3 GPU. If you don't know, there is a bug with RDNA 3 GPUs. To be more specific, it's mostly RDNA 3 GPUs that the issue is happening on, and it's about power profiles and how the power profile isn't being set correctly on those AMD GPUs. And it's fixed in the Linux kernel. But the thing is, the fix is in Linux kernel 6.13, which, if you don't know, Linux 6.13 isn't out yet. There is only a release candidate for kernel 6.13. So this user, if I go to my screen here, was having issues with performance, and using 6.13 fixed it for him. And there was one user in the comment that was saying about how kernel drivers and also like Mesa, for example, when you have a new piece of hardware, and this comes into Intel's new Battlemage graphics cards also, how when you get those new hardware, either it be RDNA 3 or RDNA 4 soon, or the new Intel Battlemage B580 GPUs, you will often get a bad experience, or not a bad experience, more of a mediocre experience when it comes to using those GPUs, let's say on something like Linux Mint. If you installed a B580 GPU in your system or an RDNA 3 GPU in your system on something like Linux Mint, you're not going to get the best when it comes to performance or when it comes to the features that could be included. Things like the power profile issue on RDNA 3 GPUs is an actual problem, and it's only available in kernel 6.13. Now, for distros like Linux Mint, there is a silver lining here. Recently, a lot of the distros like Ubuntu and Mint, they use like kernel like 6.8 and such, and they've been using this feature called the hardware enablement. And the hardware enablement, what it does is every 6 months, there is the features like this power profile fix that will probably come down to those kernel versions, so those users can get those patches. But the problem is that it's every 6 months. That is quite a long time. And if someone would choose Linux Mint, for example, and they have the latest CPU and GPU, they may not even be able to boot into the system properly to actually use it. Or they might have severe performance problems or severe graphical issues in certain games. And so, reading this person's comment, he said, "I think it's a stupid idea, just like it's a stupid idea that every distribution rebuilds all the software in existence and puts it in their own repository. It just wasted time." And I kind of agree with that comment also. I think it is quite stupid that packages get repackaged into different distributions. I also understand why packages get put into different repos on a distro, delay those package versions. So then, that distro is able to update into like different cadences instead of other distros wanting to update on other different cadences. Like, when you do a different distro like Arch or Fedora, it's a different update frequency because of them allowing to have those repos with packages, and so you get a different experience per distro. But I do kind of agree with that statement also. And he says here that Flatpak is the only solution for user-facing software. Now we need something similar for drivers, something that works with every distribution but split by kernel version. Only change driver handling with every major kernel version. Ironically, Windows has been functioning like this for decades. The operating system is the base system, services some of the most used drivers in the desktop. Newer versions of drivers can be downloaded from Windows Update or from the site of the hardware manufacturer. This works because the driver handling in Windows rarely changes. The last huge change was Vista almost 20 years ago. The rest are incremental changes. User-facing software can be downloaded from everywhere, but also from the Windows Store. Pity that Windows has sucked since version 8, but its structure allowed for everything to be supported all the time. So I kind of agree with this whole statement, not all of it. Like, Linux needs to be basically like Windows, where it hasn't changed since Vista in the kernel. I don't think that should be the way to go. But this is more a video about just how on Linux, I think there should be a change with how drivers are loaded. And so I decided to do a little bit of like a mock-up of what I think would happen if something like a Linux Mint machine was installed and a user wanted to get newer drivers on that machine. Now, as you know, distros like Linux Mint, Ubuntu, they have a driver manager where you can add extra repos, or you can see like NVIDIA proprietary drivers so you can install them easily. And I think it's great that that is available. But it's kind of useless if you are not using a NVIDIA card because the drivers are in the kernel and then you have Mesa updates. And of course, there is kernel updates in the GUI driver manager itself. I do know that, but it only allows you to go so high based on the Linux Mint's repos. So that causes a problem where you're not able to get the latest kernel, or you have to wait 6 months for that hardware enablement. So I don't know if this is already available when it comes to the kernel having hardware enablement out of the like box where you can like install it through the driver manager already. I don't know if you can do that, but what I did here was we have the kernel in Mesa here, we have the Linux Mint machine, we point out, we say, oh, okay, it's running kernel 6.8, it's running Mesa like 23.0. I'm pretty sure that's what Linux Mint is running right now, I think, but there's probably also like 6.8 point something also. And then we have the driver manager here, and then it points to what is available for install. And so what I was thinking is like either Mesa, like if you had a Mesa update or something, or a Mesa package you wanted to install, it could be available for install in this area. And so either the user could instantly install a newer Mesa version, like let's say theoretically Mesa 28 at some point, whenever that comes out. That's for a couple years away. But the user could install either the latest version of Mesa, or they could install a older version with hardware enablement in Mesa. Now, Mesa doesn't have hardware enablement, I don't think yet, but I think it'd be a cool idea if Mesa was able to do that, so they could add a lot of the more like Git master versions, experimental versions of patches that they're working on that haven't been merged into the latest version of Mesa, or they have been, and you get those features, but you still have a rather stable base for Mesa when it comes to whatever you want to use Mesa for. And then the same goes with the kernel. So you could install the latest kernel version or the hardware enablement version of that kernel if that isn't already a thing. And this could be expanded to things like audio, for example. So like Pipewire, you could get newer versions of a Pipewire package, so then you get better audio support. Or specifically, I know in the kernel, there is a specific patch for Corsair headsets, so you can get better monitoring with battery usage, but it's in a newer kernel, so you're not able to get it if you're on a Linux Mint machine, and probably won't get it till the hardware enablement happens, which is 6 months down the line. So that's quite a long time to wait for a simple, not simple, but a driver that just adds functionality to a headset that a decent amount of users and gamers probably would have. And I feel like when it comes to the GUI driver manager, this could be a thing where it's like natively supported on different desktop environments. So KDE Plasma, for example, like if we go into settings here, it could have a driver manager at the bottom here in system where you can easily look at if there is, you know, a newer kernel or a specific Mesa update that includes a certain patch that you may need. And I think one of the other big problems that happens with Linux is that normal users don't really go or don't know where to go when it comes to a changelog or looking for a specific patch, because most of the time when you look at a kernel update changelog or a Mesa changelog or even an NVIDIA driver changelog, it is really confusing for a normie user to look at something that is like written in a way that makes no sense when it comes to maybe like some Vulkan extension that got improved or introduced. A normal user won't know what that means, and they'll have to go do research on what that means. And normal users don't really want to do that. So I think another thing that should be improved or introduced is when a Messer update comes out, it becomes a lot more easier for a normal user to, one, find where that information is and be able to provide a decent rundown of what has improved, so the user has a better time when it comes to, oh, okay, I need this version because it's going to include this patch for this game or this problem with whatever display issue or etc. So that's been some of the issues that I've been, thinking about for the past like 2 weeks, I would say, since I started discussing that problem with that Reddit user. And I think that if these things don't happen, it's going to be one of the issues where things like distros like Nobara, for example, I know Nobara uses Mesa Git and it gets updated every couple of weeks because Glorious Eggroll knows that there is a lot of patches being put into Mesa. So I think the similar may go with like Bazite. I think Bazite uses just like the normal release schedule for whatever Fedora uses, which can cause issues with newer hardware, like in the future with RDNA 4 GPUs coming out and, the things like with the Battlemage B580. I know there's a specific patch open for Intel cards that hinder and have graphical issues with DirectX 12/VKD3D games. And that's quite an issue, and I do hope that it gets fixed soon, but it's also where theoretically you're gonna have to wait for that to be fully rolled out for that Mesa update, which is probably Mesa 25 or something. It's gonna take like a year or two for every distro to get that version of Mesa, so then Intel cards can have a better experience, and there's gonna be more Reddit posts continue to be posted about, oh, I have this specific graphical issue, and they won't know about that specific Mesa update, and everyone will have to comment, you have to use this Mesa up, which means you have to install some third-party repo, which means you have to move to a different distro to get newer packages. It's kind of a rather big issue, I would say, that the more I think about it, the more I see a path down this line where distros like Linux Mint will have to introduce newer packages, or we're just going to be in this issue where people are just going to say, well, you're going to have to, enable this repo, or you're going to have to move to this distro to get newer packages, which a lot of people don't want to do that. Imagine someone's using Linux Mint for maybe like a month or so, and they've got everything set up properly, and then someone says, oh, you have to move to Arch now to get newer packages for that patch. Like, that's not cool. Or add this third-party repo like for a newer Mesa or a newer kernel. That user will be either really annoyed that they'll have to do that, or they'll be really confused of how to add like a third-party repo or something, and they may muck something up, and they'll have to open up a terminal most likely to add that repo to get newer packages. It just seems like a really big issue in my eyes. So I would like to know in the comments your thoughts about this whole idea that I have created, and if you've ever thought about this being like introduced or something in Linux, I would really like to know. Definitely like the video if you enjoyed me ranting about this. Definitely subscribe to the channel also, and thank you to my supporters. I'll show a screenshot of you now. I really do appreciate you guys giving me money every single month, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.